So it's always weird. We've come full circle with the podcast. We're almost a year in, and we're back with my first ever guest. And before we go into you and the confidence on camera, I just watched your latest camera tips before we came on air. And I realized I think I'm speaking to the wrong person of the household because we've now got a new star. So when's your missus's first fitness rant?
We're still waiting on it. Now, actually, what I think is that I've made her look really good because I'm a wonderful editor. She's terrible on camera. She's actually in the kitchen, somewhere out the back there. That makes it sound like I've got her cooking or something, like some kind of 1950s housewife. It's not. What I'm saying is I hope she can vaguely hear this because it will annoy her, and then we'll see what happens. But no, to be fair, Laura, my girlfriend, at Girl Gains blog, should you care to check her out, used to do loads of YouTubing and vlogging kind of a few years ago when she used to compete a lot more in bikini shows, and still hasn't for a while, but she's perfectly good on camera and funny and interesting. Hopefully she never hears this because we don't need this to go into her head. She's far too confident as it is, but she's not a bad one to have on there either.
I like with all the hate that podcasts are getting, with Joe Rogan saying things right now, we've already been sort of like misogynistic within the first 5 minutes of the episode.
I can start dropping N-bombs if it really helps.
I did say that I wanted to come for Joe Rogan, so maybe we just start. No. You can be as controversial as you like. You can be an anti-COVID guy, but please
imagine that's how I started this.
Just first line,
straight out the gate.
Yeah, cool. So, obviously, we're talking about here. Obviously, the latest thing that you've come in with is the camera tip stuff, which I think is generally exciting. And I do think there's a huge market for it with personal trainers. I have learned in the 10, 11 years that I've done this are good at one thing generally. Good personal trainers, anyway. Personal training. Yeah. You read about personal training, they watch personal training, and they've never really done anything else. And we have these people that don't know business and don't know marketing. So before we go into the key lessons from it, obviously you have a slightly different background to a lot of the personal trainers in the industry. And obviously we spoke about your personal training history last time, but what are the key lessons you've learned? Tell us about your performing arts career. What's your experience in theatre, acting, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so as Simon kindly says that, I have a performing background. So I've been a personal trainer for, I think this is my 11th year. It blurs after a certain period of time, right? You're never entirely sure how long it's been. It's over a decade though. And before that, I was an actor. I went to drama school for 3 years, a place called Italia Conti, which is the UK's oldest drama school. I was probably quite late coming to performing. You know how you see lots of people who, they're those weird, prodigious children who were performers from the age of 4. I was like, that wasn't that.
You're not Macaulay Culkin or Daniel Radcliffe.
I was not Macaulay Culkin. I was not Michael Jackson. That could lead somewhere cancelable.
I was thinking the same thing.
We'll keep going. So I first did a performing thing. I did Grease in high school and played Kaniki. So, you sing Grease Lightning. And it really... I'm from a small place in England called Hereford or Herefordshire, which is a really rural place on the border of England and Wales.
Good cider.
And good cider. And basically one of the only things we're famous for is booze. Booze, cows, and the SAS. Let's shout out to Hereford. But everyone in there is a plumber, an electrician, a farmer, tradesman-y kind of thing. And so it doesn't occur to you to be a performer because I don't know anyone who was doing that. And it wasn't until, I think it's year 9 or 10, I forget exactly, in school, probably around 14, 15, when, you start doing drama lessons. That becomes apparently part of the curriculum at some point. And I just remember being really enjoying it and being, good at it sort of immediately relative. And that's always relative to who else you're around, right? It's just about like, some people are naturally great athletes relative to the rest of their kids at their school. I suppose relative to the rest of the kids at the school, I was a naturally good actor, whatever that really means. And interestingly, this suddenly got me some female attention for kind of the first time, right? I was a sort of spotty, slightly awkward kid, and I'm still kind of some of those things. And this was the first bit I was like, well, it turns out if I pretend to be someone else, people like me more. So this is good. And so, I did method acting for playing Kaniki, where I just, I strutted around like I was in the T-Birds all the time and just acted like a
song. randomly.
Yeah, not quite bursting out in song, but I mean, I must have watched that film hundreds of times, just rewatching the scenes that Kaniki was in and going, what's he doing there? How's he doing that? Okay, let's go back. I don't know, I'm going to say it like this. And then he does this. And just kind of mimicking a little bit what you're seeing. And so that's kind of where the love of that thing started. And then I ummed and ahed about, what should I do at A level and then at uni. And I'm in an hour in between philosophy, psychology, and acting and performing, and ultimately went the performing route. And 3 years of drama school, and then a bunch of years working after that in predominantly theatre. Though obviously you do plenty of on-camera things as well. And then how I got into personal training was I wanted a job that I could do around auditions. I could do around acting. And I'd, from about the age of 17, I think I was, when I discovered after years of crap skin, and I couldn't seem to do anything about it, no matter what medications I took and diets I tried and all those things, my acne was still crap. So, but I'd also gotten a bit chunky because I'd sort of stopped playing any sport post school. And, you're 17 now, so you're drinking a crap load of beer and eating a load of junk because you've got a bit more freedom. And I was like, being chunky and spotty, not so useful for the attracting the other sex part of the aims of my life. So I discovered kind of the gym at that point at 17, and then I was like, well, if you're going to be spotty, at least be in shape. And so did that. And then that sort of started the love of gym stuff. And fast forward 6-7 years, whatever it was. And was like, okay, I could either be a driving instructor or I could be a personal trainer. That seemed much more appealing to me because I'm a bit of a nerd at heart. So I like knowing all the bits and pieces and was forever reading things. I was like, and I can do that around performing. And then for the first few years of being a personal trainer, I did that. I would audition, I'd perform a play in the evenings and then just have clients in the day. And then when another thing came in, I'd move all those clients that I'd just see them in the evening when I was rehearsing in the day, and so on and kind of so forth. Camera stuff, easier to fit it around because most things that you'll film, you're on set for a few days. It's not, unless you're literally Batman, you're not there that much. So that's not that difficult to work around being a personal trainer. But yeah, that's the kind of background in that side of things. And it's, it probably exposes you to a bunch of things that most personal trainers don't do or don't come across, which is performing in all its various facets, which really to some degree is about how do I hold someone's attention while being authentic? Because you could hold someone's attention like a terrorist, but that's, a bit different. If you just strap a bomb to me, I'm like, oh, fuck, we've got to pay him attention because he might explode. But that's a little bit different than can I keep it with whatever I'm speaking about or doing? And I think that is probably underrated as a skill set for most personal trainers, because I think we touched on it. I'm going to presume if the trainer's listening to this, and this is a huge presumption, but let's presume that you're good at your job, right? Let's presume you've got the substance. I'm going to talk about style versus substance. And the reality is you actually need both style and substance, right? Like if let's say the best trainer, you're a kick-ass coach, all the points, you're scienced out the eyeballs, but you're boring as shit. Well, and you can't hold or grab attention, especially if we're talking in social media terms, in an online sense. The reality is we're competing for attention. And we're not just, business coaches will often talk about an abundance mindset. There's plenty of business to go around. And that's true. Because there's a shitload of obesity in the world. And so there's plenty of scope for business for personal trainers. But we're competing in an online sense with everything else on that Instagram feed, with everything else on the YouTube feed, with everything else on insert social media thing that you use here. You're competing with that. And you only have to think about your own behavior to know that that's true. Like how many great coaches do you think you ignore because their content is boring or doesn't feel like it speaks to you? You think they don't feel like, oh, why is no one engaging with my stuff? It's often not because their points aren't cogent and coherent and correct. It's that they deliver them in a way that doesn't speak to their audience, often because they haven't clearly defined an audience, or because in the nicest possible way, it's really monotonous and boring and lacks just a few of these things. In other words, it lacks style. The substance is right, but the style is off. And now on the flip side, if you're flashy as fuck, you're the most charismatic person since Freddie Mercury, but without AIDS, right? Then you could hold attention. Everyone paying like, wow, I can't keep my eyes off this guy. He's amazing. But if you're a crap coach, yeah, you'll grab my attention. I might buy something from you, but the delivery on it will suck. And so you won't keep my business. You need both style and substance to succeed at this. And I think over the long haul, don't get me wrong, substance is more important. You need to be a good coach first and foremost. But there are plenty of great coaches or coaches who are good enough to get results for the people that they work with, who don't have the business, in part because they haven't defined a business thing and they don't necessarily understand those bits and pieces, but also because they're just a bit boring. And in an attention grabbing medium, which is any of the social media things, you can't afford to be boring. Now, there's multiple ways to not be boring. You only have, like, one of the exercises I get people to do if we're talking about this is just make a list of the people you like watching. Start within fitness, but, you know, branch that out a little bit. You're going to come across similar names. There's going to be James Smith. There's going to be Joe Wicks. There's going to be JP. I'm just sticking with J's, right? You could branch that out further and go, okay, you know, for me on YouTube, I watch a lot of music stuff as well. I'm a bass player. There's a great guy called Rick Beato, who is, you know, is like 50-something American music producer and musician who plays fucking everything under the sun. And he reminds me, he's a bit like if your dad was also a phenomenal musician, this is Rick Beato. And he is warm. He's not like funny, but you like him. Like, he's really enthusiastic. He has this warmth, is the word I'm going to keep coming back to him. And he's hyper knowledgeable. He's really, really good. You're like, wow, that was impressive. Like, his ability to break things down and explain them to you and like, okay, cool, is great. So I really like Rick Beato. There's a guy called Derek Muller who runs a YouTube channel called Veritasium, which is a science, engineering and mathematics communication channel. And again, he's good looking as far as math nerds go, which, you know, I realize the bar isn't high, but that plays a bit of a role in people's success. We shouldn't pretend that it doesn't, but it's not the be all and the end all. Rick Beato is not good looking. Sorry, Rick. You're not bad looking, but you're not going to be like, fuck me, Brad Pitt, right? And nor is Derek Muller, I should point out. He's a perfectly fine looking dude, but the content they put out is engaging, it's interesting, it's well delivered. He is likable, he's enthusiastic. So when you're watching these people, you're going to start seeing, well, this one is sarcastic, this one is dry, this one is warm, this one is enthusiastic, this one is funny, this one is knowledge. Like, there isn't one particular style that has to denote what is not boring. But what they all are is not boring, but they're not boring in their way. And I'd like to think that we can all find our way of being our version of not boring that will commit, because it still also has, we're almost trying to balance, for me, two things. How do I keep your engagement without being boring? How do I do that? And how do you do that in an authentic manner, in a way that is you, right? And that takes time to figure out, because often, who knows what that is? Like, one of the tests I would have is, when you watch yourself back, or you get a friend to watch you back, does that person that you're watching look like the person your best friend recognizes? Like, is that the person they hang out with? Do you make the same jokes? Are you kind of the same? Because if you ain't, now you can amplify bits of that. You know, for things like fitness rants, I amplify parts of my personality for the delivery of that medium. But that's different than if I'm running a video for an exercise library, where we're going to do something quite different. But they all feel like me. Like, if you hang out with me, you ever meet me, I'll make the same shit dick jokes. I'll make the same types of references. I'll want to talk about the same stuff. I'm hoping that when you meet me, you're like, oh, that is the guy that I see on the screen through those bits and pieces. And that's that strange thing that we mean by authentic. So I've sort of gone off down and round through the weeds on this answer that I think was, what was my performing background? But there you go.
No, I think that's really good. I think you hit the nail on the head there with trying to find something that's not boring, that is unapologetically you. And I think, and that's something I've worked hard with. Maybe not, I'm learning more of the camera stuff now. You know, a lot of what you've put out recently has really, really helped me. And the call we got on last year really helped me. Yeah. But from my background of educating trainers and public speaking, I've had to do that time and time again. Like, I found a way that works in the UK, and I developed this side of my personality. And then I come to Hong Kong, and it's an entirely different audience. And you have to go and find what their troubles are and how to engage people that come from a very, very, very different background. Yeah. But I suppose with people looking to be better on camera, one of the biggest roadblocks I can imagine to that of being authentic in themselves is, and you mentioned this in one of your recent camera tips, is being comfortable in playing and making a bit of a fool of yourself. And I think you did a great video about amplifying it before you click record so that you find that middle ground. was this something that your first one was Grease, which like not many of us fall into a hard-hitting drama where we get to be cool and stern. We're not the Punisher.
I don't know if I call Grease a hard-hitting drama.
No, but like not. But my point. That's my point. Is that like none of us go first one's acting. If we all could play James Bond on day one, it'd be easy because I'm saying that's easy. But I want to play that character. But to put on a leather jacket and sing and be a bit of an idiot and come across a bit weird, it's hard. Is this something that you took to quite naturally? Being an idiot, of course, that's what I mean. But like, or just like being able to be confident making a fool yourself in today's like societal norms. Was that something you've practiced and got better at? And if so, how did you go about doing that?
So I'm reminded of an old acting tutor of mine who used the phrase "rush to embarrassment." What they were really kind of talking about is that when we're about to do a scene, or we're going to step in front of people on camera or on a stage to deliver some public speaking or whatever it is, we tend to get nervous, and we're nervous because we're worried about being judged, about making a tit of ourselves, doing it wrong, looking a bit crap, and people going like, what was that? So really what we're worried about is being embarrassed. We're worried that we're going to feel embarrassed. And that's it. That's the great worry. You're not going to be hung, drawn, and quartered as a result of whatever happens here, unless you live in like North Korea or something, in which case you're not listening to this anyway. But like, ignore my things. If you're living in some heinous dictatorship, then maybe my camera tips don't apply. But outside of that,
I'm probably the closest person I'll be listening to.
This is true. Hong Kong, everyone. A bastion of freedom and democracy at the moment.
Getting better by the day.
Am I going to get you arrested for that sentence?
Yeah, maybe my national security law is going to kick in.
Yeah.
Wonderful place here. Come and visit when the travel ban ends.
Yeah, but we're worried that we're going to be embarrassed, and if that's the thing we're terrified of, then we need to get over that, because that's the thing that holds us back. That's the little monkey on the shoulder, kind of going, "Oh God," the whole time. And honestly, if that is the worst thing that can happen to you, I know it seems terrifying and a bit like, "Oh crap." Apparently someone's ringing me, so apologies from there. But that's a good strong start on a podcast. But that's it. That is as bad as it gets. You feel embarrassed. And we're so scared of feeling embarrassed because, well, it's not a nice feeling, and I get that. But the faster we can get over the fear of it, the faster we can actually do some useful work. And so rush to embarrassment. Right. I'm terrified of this thing. Okay, fuck it. Let's just go, try it, and see. And let's, but I know you do, but let's go anyway, right? Because it's going to be awkward, and but we have to get past it. Until you get past that, and you're not stood there in front of that camera or on that stage thinking, "Oh my God, I'm embarrassed." Oh my God. If you're thinking that, you're not thinking about the point of what you're about to do.
Yes. And
you can't do anything very well if you're not thinking about the thing you're about to do. And so we've just got to get past that. Rush to embarrassment always stuck with me as a good thing. And as someone who had bad skin, like, there's a dichotomy between wanting to perform and being a performer, and which is look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. There's an element of that, right? And having acne, which is don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me. And so there was always this dichotomy in there for me. And look, when you put yourself on camera and you watch some of it back, the first bunch of times that you do all this, you're going to be thinking things like, "Oh my God, how has anyone ever wanted to have sex with me? Look at my nose, look at my skin, look at my whatever you think is shit about you, put it here." When you watch yourself to begin with, that is what you will see. That is where your eyes will go, and that is what you will be thinking about. And all of that is horseshit, because it ain't helpful. Because unless you're a hooker selling yourself for sex, you're not selling what you look like. You're selling how you help the person on the other end of that camera, or on the other end of your public speech. It's not that you ever get to the point where you don't care what you look like. It's just that it's a bit irrelevant for how we're doing this thing that we're doing. It's not irrelevant in the sense that, look, attractive people tend to be more successful in visual mediums. No shit. But that's not insurmountable. Because also, unless you're willing to hire Kendall Jenner's surgeon, what are you going to do about it? This is the hand you got. Let's get over it. And so when you start watching yourself or looking at these things, what we're interested in is, what's the point of what I'm doing right now? Now, that's going to have an element of, well, we can unpack that a little bit. God, I hate the phrase unpack that, right? But we could go, well, let's expand on that and like, okay, who is this for? What's the point of this bit of content? Whether that's a whole, speech and lecture on a full topic in front of an audience? Or is it a quick minute-long camera tip? Or is it insert whatever you think your content is here? Well, for me, when I'm talking about camera tips, I'm talking to personal trainers who don't feel confident on camera. Voila, there you go. Right. It's a nice, clear audience. Could I talk to everyone who doesn't feel confident on camera? Yes, it's a bigger audience. But the problem I'm going to have with that is, how do I use examples that relate to you as you listen to this? So, if I was trying to go, when we're talking about rushing to embarrassment, we've got to get over this fear of being in front of camera. You know how clients come to you and they're like, I'm just a bit nervous about going into the gym. And you're like, yeah, because every personal trainer has had that conversation with a client at some point, assuming you've been doing the job longer than 6 weeks. And you know how we then say to them things like, look, we kind of got to go, right? And I promise you'll start to get over that, and we'll focus on what we're doing once we're in there and gravy. And if you're really terrified, well, maybe we can just get some kit for the home and we can just practice that at home a little bit. And then eventually we're confident enough to get into the gym. Yeah, well, we're going to do the same thing with this camera thing. I know you're a bit afraid of and worried about it at this point, but just like you talk to your clients about going to the gym, we've just got to go to the camera. We've just got to start doing these bits and pieces. Now, I can't use that example and have that work to a mass audience because there's too many people. That doesn't work for a banker. They're like, I'd have to find some banking reference that I don't know. When we're talking to an audience, we're talking to a bunch of individuals. I'm talking to you, personal trainer who listens to Simon's podcast or has an interest in some fitness related kind of field. And if I'm not, and I'm using references that don't apply to you or about shit you don't care about, or in languages that you don't use, well, then I'm not going to keep your attention. Remember, we're playing an attention competition game. And so I've got to make this feel like it applies to you, or you will have scrolled the fuck on. So when we're doing that, we've got to find a way of defining our audience and going, okay, audience clarity. Who, and this is just a business thing. Who am I talking to? About what issues? And then this piece of content, okay, so that's the audience. What problems have they got? So what's the point in this piece of content? This is trying to help them overcome whatever it is that they're trying to overcome. This is 38-year-old Sally with her 2 kids, done, a bunch of yo-yo dieting and Weight Watchers and yada, yada, yada. Feels confused. Sally doesn't use technical language. I'm not going to say adipose tissue because she doesn't say adipose tissue. She reads Cosmo magazine and they call it tummy fat, right? Or belly or whatever the fuck they call it. And, I might be able to educate my client over time and they might want to use that phrase, but I don't have to either. But okay, how are they talking so that I can actually grab their attention first off and then communicate to them? And then I could also think, if I've got Sally within that, I always think back to where I can, show, don't tell. Just a general teaching thing. Show, don't tell. Monkey see, monkey do. We learn first by mimicking shit, not by intellectually understanding it, for the most part. So for the audience that is Sally and Weight Watchers and stuff, who, maybe I could do here's a full day of eating vlog where I'm going to show you how I eat chocolate, drink wine, and still lose weight. Right? And I'm going to show you it, not tell you about it. I'm not going to sit in front of a camera and be like, and the reason we can lose weight while doing this is because the only thing that matters here is a caloric deficit. As far as your adipose tissue is concerned, we're playing an energy balance equation game. Sally has tuned the fuck out. This is not how Sally talks. Now, if you're talking to personal trainers, that can be different. But I'm just going to try and go, okay, what's the point of this video? Who's it for? What's the best medium, the best way of me telling that or showing that? And so sometimes it might be, in front of a whiteboard, if that's relevant to your audience. Sometimes it's going to be in the gym, giving them a tip. Sometimes it's going to be just showing them, watch me while I do this, right? And then I'll talk through my thought process. So what I've got for breakfast here is and the reason I'm doing it is because if I don't do this at this point, I get so hungry at lunchtime that my husband has pissed me off so much that I end up descending on Greg's bakery aisle like some plague of locusts in biblical times. And then I'm like, oh, fuck, I've overdone it. Whatever, right? Just go, how do I clarify the audience? What's the point? What's the best way of showing that? And then the final part, I think, that we'd layer into that to begin with is, how do I make that so it's not boring? I'm going to keep coming back to do not be boring, do not be boring, do not be boring, as like this super important lens we need to layer over stuff. So you might go through a bit of that process before you even press the big red button and start recording any of this. It's, have we strategized what we're about to do? And I think, again, if we're talking to trainers, how do you write a gym plan before you've looked at your client? and their goals and what they're like and what issues they've got. And their shoulder's fucked. Maybe I shouldn't have written that thing that I put in there. Like, assessing stuff is an important part of appropriate strategy. And people just don't do this with themselves on camera. Like, if you've done that list, make that list of people that you really like, and then write out the adjectives, describe what you like about them. What are they like? Are they warm? Are they funny? Are they excitable? They won't be boring. I'll tell you this. The one thing you won't write down about the people you like watching on camera is none of them are boring. Because you won't like watching people who are boring. That's just a kind of given. Are they warm? Do you like them? Are they intimidating? What is it? And then we're going to try and look at you through that same pair of eyes. And for content you've already done. Okay, Simon on camera. What's he like? What do we think when he starts speaking? What can we play up to? What type of content suits him? What type of delivery? Because we're trying to then balance that combination of appropriate audience and you, and what suits you within that. If you're not naturally a really, like, you make loads of jokes and that's just kind of you don't have to be that. We don't need someone to be cracking jokes every 2 minutes. We just need them to be engaging, and humor is only one method of being engaging. But we want to watch you and start to figure that out. And that's almost what we mean by asking your friend to be like, does that seem like me?
Yeah.
Now, you need a blunt friend, because lots of friends are too nice. And some of them won't know exactly what to feed back on. They'll be like, no, yeah, it's good. Right. And stuff kind of like that. And we're just building an ability to bring all this together. Hopefully that made some kind of sense.
Yeah, I want to come back to that last point, because there's something quite interesting I think we can do in a little bit. But I want to go back to that rush to embarrassment, because I really, really, really like that, because I do think that makes a huge difference. And I think for me, if I look at every time I got out my comfort zone in anything in life, but obviously on camera when I first did this, the first time I did the podcast, there's things that are primarily embarrassing. First time I did the podcast, reaching out to people I didn't know.
Yeah,
they could say no. That's slightly embarrassing and knocked your ego. But the one that I always draw my attention to was back when I started working for Name Redacted, and for all the things that they did to crush their employees' spirits. They got rid of this thing for making sure they don't feel bad, which seems really mad to me, because I think it's one of the single most important things that they ever used to do. But they used to have this induction where people used to come in, and on the first team meeting, they had to sing. Right? And nice. Sing was doing an exercise. We had people singing Firestarter, doing bicep curls. Yeah. We had someone singing. The best one was my good pal Tarek, who, bless him, he's one of the quietest, most shy, humble guys you've ever met in your life. And we turned down the lights, gave him a 1 kilo dumbbell, and he had to sing Bump and Grind. and after that, right, do you give a fuck anymore about doing a split squat in front of your peers? And I did row your boat whilst on the rower.
Nice, good.
And I only found out, by the way, 2 years later, that I was the fucking mug who they started this on. There was not an induction like that before me. We did it for 2 years. Yeah, they were like, this guy seems gullible and dumb enough to fucking do it. But I think it really is important to sort of ease the nerves, and it only goes up from there. And when I got into more public speaking, it's the same thing as, like, I always make a point to be slightly self-deprecating, whether it's on camera or public speaking, because everyone there sits nervous about, this guy's up front, this guy's been doing this longer. If I'm poking fun at myself, like if I want to ever make a joke at anyone else's expense, it's always how they're better than me at something. Yeah. Because then it all of a sudden puts people at ease. And I think if you can rush to embarrassment, not only does it make your content better, but that person you're speaking to across the other side of the camera lens all of a sudden feels more comfortable for that exact reason.
Well, there's actually some interesting human behavior kind of research that the more someone puts you a bit on a pedestal and perceives you as like, oh my God, they're amazing, he's a personal trainer, he must never eat chocolate, the more likely they are to lie to you. Yes. And actually, we want, if you're a coach, you can't coach people when they're lying to you, because you're coaching half a story, right? You need the truth. And so we have to try and cultivate a space where people feel okay to tell us the truth. Now, we can't always do that. Some people aren't ready to tell themselves the truth, but we can try and do that. And as someone said there, self-deprecation is one of those things we tend to naturally like. No one likes the arrogant wank bag who doesn't think they're shit to anything and has never made a mistake. I am so glorious. Like, no, you want to hear those times when, I fell over on stage and nearly pulled a curtain down, or whatever it kind of happens.
Or us talking a year ago on this podcast about how perfect Luke McGurk was.
Yeah, exactly. Like we like self-deprecation, and you have to get the balance right. If all you're doing is taking the piss out of yourself and just telling all the ways in which you fucked up, and you never give any useful help about how to get out of that, or blah, 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 then you aren't going to be perceived as a relative expert in said thing and the person that they want to go to. So there's a balance of these things where you need to be seen as somewhat an authority figure in whatever field you are, because you're selling the service that you offer, which relates to that field. But if you aren't, and also you're a fucking liar. Of course you've made mistakes. Of course you've fucked up. Of course you've done things you're embarrassed of. We all have. Some element of us sharing that tends to encourage a more open relationship between ourselves and our clients. And that's true whether I'm talking about camera tips. And, I did one the other day on the importance of editing. And in that one, I just put in a load of bits of me fucking up various takes that I was doing that thing, and just being like, look, you didn't know any of these were in here, in any of them, because they're edited out. So no idea.
Generally thought that was deliberate.
No. Well, it was partially deliberate, but like it didn't have to be that deliberate. Like I planned on, that was actually interesting. I was doing the topic was the importance of editing, and I bullet point a bunch of things before I'm going to do it, and then I riff on things is usually the way I tend to do stuff. And whenever you bullet point, and then, okay, so I've got these points, I'm going to make that one there, right, back to the lens we're going to take, and you're sort of half remembering the point that you're going to make, and you're going to go for a take, and you're like, the importance of editing is blah, 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 right? But sometimes you fuck up or say it a bit wrong, or you're like, I didn't like the way that sounded, or I went for a long one and then I lost the point. Where the shit was I? You trip over words. Like the opening of camera tips each time is camera tips, camera tips, camera tips. If you say that a bunch of times, it just starts sounding weird to yourself. You're like, why am I put camera tips? Do people talk about that? Camera tips. Camera tip. You know how like sometimes when you write a word, you're like, is that how you spell it? Why does Friday look weird? Right? Like,
remember the episode of Scrubs where he's like, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. What am I talking about?
Okay. Yeah. Strong reference. But that kind of thing. So I hadn't deliberately thought, I'm going to fuck this up a bunch and then I can edit it together and that will then work. That was just during the edit. I went, do you know what? All these fuck ups that are in every single one of the ones that I do, I'm just going to leave them in this one because that kind of makes the point. Where I'm going, play. Ooh, play sounds fucking weird. Who sounds like play? Right? Like edit, nah, right? Whatever. All that crap that comes out that, when you first do it, you'll feel a bit embarrassed. I'm like, fuck, I fucked up. Right? Like, yeah, you did, but no one sees that. I'm alone in the room that I'm recording this podcast in. And so I fuck up. Oh, well, here's what you do. When you fuck up, you just take a pause. You leave the camera running. I don't have to restart it and start it because I'm going to edit this. And so I leave it running. I take a pause. Sometimes I laugh at myself because I'm like, that was fucking shit. All right. Okay. Reset. What was my point? Quick back look at my my bullet point. Okay. It's that. Okay. Right. Let's stare right back down the lens. Off I go with the point that I'm making. Cool. Okay. What was my next one? And have a quick look back at my bullet point. My next point is going to be this. Okay. I need to make sure that I've done this next sentence with a slight pitch variation or speed intonation change, or, what's the point in this? There's a thing you can take from drama school, which is just known as verbing, which is just an intention thing. Like with this next section, I'm trying to be intriguing. With this bit, I'm trying to be warm and reassuring. With this bit, I'm trying to be fucking blunt. Like you can play with intention in different takes. And just because some of them will suit you and some won't. And, if you're a big, intimidating kind of dude and you're trying to get more people to coach, maybe you really need to play with warmth because that isn't something you have. Another thing an old drama school teacher said, what do you have for free? Like the shit that we think about you when you just wander in a room. Like some people are just like, wow, that's attractive person. That's a really charismatic person. Just when they come in, you're like, kind of looking at them a lot. Like that person's really warm. That person's intimidating as shit. Like we all have these judgments about people when they come into rooms. They might be wrong or right. That's a different issue, but we have them inevitably. And so what do you have for free? Some of you are naturally really warm and you don't have to try hard for that. And people just open up to you and that's gravy. But some of you aren't. And if you're selling a coaching thing and you're really fucking intimidating the whole time, And you don't mean to be, it's just the way that you come across. Well, we might want to work on that, depending on the audience, depending on the thing that we sell. If you're selling, powerlifting merchandise, well, maybe I want you to look like Martin Ford or Eddie Hall, and I don't want you to be that warm on some of these. Maybe some of the thing is built on fuck, right? Maybe it's built on that. Now, occasionally, one of the things we like with most people is we like to like them. We like that they're warm and funny and all those bits and pieces sometimes. But it doesn't mean every bit of content has to be, because it doesn't. What's the point of the content for the audience and the purpose of what's kind of going on? So yeah, there's loads in there.
How does somebody, this has come up time and time again, it's about knowing your audience. And for someone that doesn't really have that, like you mentioned, you might do all this stuff before you hit the big red button. So how does someone who doesn't know their audience start to piece together a real direct niche of who they're speaking to? And when they've got that, how do they know what that person wants?
So that's a tough one, right? Because you could, almost every business coach under the sun is going to start with something like this: defining your avatar, figuring out your kind of niche. And I'm definitely not an expert on nailing your avatar and all those kind of bits and pieces, right? I know what mine is, and that sits very comfortably with what I'm interested in and hopefully what I'm quite good at these days. When you're starting out, we're not going to be as great yet because we're early in our careers, and it takes time to, come up with all the knowledge and the things that you need to actually be great at your job. We're very rarely great at our job straight out the gate. So to begin with, how do you know who you want to work with when you're 21, 22, and these kind of bits and pieces? You're like, I don't know. And I often think a lot of people online are better suited starting in a gym for a couple of years, getting good before they start worrying about this. Now, having said that, I also know
them performance as well, right? Like, I feel you're performing on the gym floor. Anytime I have a bad day, I've got to come to my next client and be on it, energetic, lively. And that will carry over to marketing on the online.
Yeah, and look, also, in those interactions you have with clients, you start to learn, what do they ask regularly about? You come up with a bunch of ways of making the point about protein, right? That, I'm going to use my Lego block analogy at this particular thing, and I'm going to use it. You come up over time with ways of explaining topics because you're just bouncing them off the person and being like, did that work? No? Okay, that analogy sucks. Never use that one again, right? Or you go, yeah, that was a good way of doing that. Or, you and again, you're then around other trainers a lot more, and you're like, well, that was a good one that they just did over there. What was that? To listen into their conversation a little bit more. I'm like, he's explained that well, or she nailed that point, or whatever that is. And that, I think, is underrated by most trainers just to begin with, is spending a couple of years in a gym, at least a couple of years in a gym, ideally in a gym that has something like the gym that shall not be named, and a process that takes you through other people who are already good, and you learn a bunch, and it can accelerate your skill set and your confidence on the gym floor, and also that performing kind of element of it. Once you kind of got those things though, how do we define that audience for you? Well, in part, do you want to work with? Because you could look at this with a couple of different things. Like sometimes you end up with an audience that you didn't mean to, right? Like years ago, I dated an Irish influencer. And so I ended up with thousands of these followers that had fuck all to do with fitness. Like 90% of my audience was female at this point, and they all lived in Ireland. And yet that wasn't what I was interested in doing or talking about. I was interested in starting to get interested in mechanics and bits and pieces. And that's not I didn't have the audience to sell that to. If I'd have been smarter and known more at the time, I'd have come up with more group coaching plans that were aimed at 20 to 35-year-old females with a particular care about. But I didn't really think about it in those terms, and I wasn't interested, so I didn't leverage that. Now I've kind of fallen into, well, I like teaching other trainers all the various things I know. I have quite a range of interests, so that's worked out well for me. One of the easiest ways that a lot of people will start doing is talking to effectively themselves, but several years ago, right? So if you're 24, cool. At 21, what did you want? What were you reading? What were you trying to do? I was reading Men's Health, and I but now I'm 25. I'm interested in health and blah, 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 right? It's like, yeah. Is that what your audience is interested in? Like if you at 21 weren't interested in that, you talking to you at 21 who was interested in looking awesome at the beach and going to Ibiza and trying to bang chicks, it's like, well, you probably need to include things that relate again to that audience. So try and put yourself back in your shoes a little period of time ago and go, okay, what was I interested in? What did I like? What did I read? Where did I hang out? Go and start looking at those sources. How does Steve Cook communicate his bits and pieces? How do Men's Health deliver their headlines and the way they put things together? What products does Jeff Nippard offer, and bits and pieces for things that are relevant to a similar type of audience, and start trying to learn from that. And then we're doing the same thing we would for everything. Go, okay, have I got a bunch of products that serve that audience? Can I have a free thing so I can generate some trust? And can it be really good? And we're going to run, whether this is written or delivered on camera, the same rules apply. Don't be fucking boring. Use references that communicate to that person, whoever they happen to be. And okay, and have that advice, whatever it is that you're giving or selling, it needs to be really good. It needs to be really good. If it's real generic and just like sleep 8 hours and cool, that might be fine. But is that feasible for that 30 to 35-year-old single mother? No, dumbass. Right. So fucking don't put that in your pissing ebook. It's just not right. It's not going to work. And if it doesn't work and we come back to substance now rather than style, well, what are the odds of that person is going to want to buy the next thing in your product ladder, the next offering up the chain of cost? Because you might have your one-to-one coaching stuff as the most expensive thing that you offer, and it's the most tailored and individualized. But do you have a free thing? Do you have a 10 quid thing that they can kind of dip their toe in that's going to be a 6-week course on, right? 6 weeks to bigger biceps, right? The 8-week ab plan. There's a reason that these things exist, by the way, right? And often you bought them. And then the next thing up from there, maybe we've got like a group coaching kind of platform, which is, depending on your audience, anywhere from like 50 to 150 quid kind of thing. And that could be, rather than just a preset plan that they can go and do, it's group coached through. And then on top of that, finally, you have your one-to-one thing. So you've just got like a product funnel of things, or a product ladder. And then my content is aimed at just getting people in. Simon Mitchell has some really nice stuff on content pillars of going, okay, which bits of my audience, because my audience is, it's not just made up of one homogenous person that's repeated time and time again. There's going to be different bits and people at different stages along there. So maybe some of them want a bit more of this information heavy stuff. Maybe some of them prefer just following and watching along with some things. Maybe I need some carousels in there. Maybe I need some video in there. Maybe I need whatever. There's lots of different ways of delivering it, but it's all going to start with who is that person, or who is roughly that audience, and what do they struggle with? And am I actually in the position to solve those struggles? Like really solve them and relate to them? Not like, yeah, I can help single mothers lose weight. You can, of course you can. You're a personal trainer. You understand fucking energy balance and other bits and pieces. Of course you can. But that doesn't mean you know how to relate to them. And so if you can't relate to them, that doesn't mean they relate to you. And if they don't relate to you and how your content talks to them and what it's like to feel, well, then they ain't buying anything from you. Which is why, if your advice to the single mother is get, sleep, the importance of sleep. Yeah, you're not wrong, but it's fucking stupid for that audience because it's just unrealistic. What are they going to do? I know your baby's crying, but ignore them. You need your sleep. You're like, no, that's just not going to happen. Like we need to understand the audience. And if you don't know where they hang out and what they consume already, try and figure that stuff out. Go on a copywriting course. Check out Mike Samuel's Freedom Kickstarter program that he's got there. Coffee Shop Copywriter, should you want to check him out on Instagram. Go check out Ollie Carson and some of the business stuff where you can flesh out these things from people who are better at the business side of stuff than me, because it's definitely, I can help with bits, but it's not my forte. My real aim within this part of things is I have a shitload of experience performing, like actually perform. Like when we talk about editing and the sort of technical bits, they're all great, but look, editing and the camera that you use and lighting and all that stuff, if you suck on camera, then all those things are just polishing a turd, right? We can make the turd look a little prettier. We can, but it's failing because you're failing. And public speaking is one of those ones where you can't hide any of that stuff, right? Like, there is no quick, flashy, amazing thing that's going to work for an hour if you're the one who has to speak for an hour, right? That's just you. Cool. The lighting and the sound and stuff will be awesome for a minute, and then we're over it. And then it's you. Are you engaging? Do you know your topic well enough? Are you clear and concise? Are you sprinkling in enough humor or references that get them? Do you know how to hold attention? Do you know how to use your voice to do that? Do you know when to move and when not to move? If I'm going to make a point, I might want to make a point. I don't start saying I'm going to make a point and then I made a point and then I made a point. No. Make the point. Emphasize it. Stop. But one of the big mistakes people make if they're public speaking and they want to deliver a really important line. So one of the things I did an Instagram poll on my story that found 78% of personal trainers felt uncomfortable on camera. Cool. Well, I could bury that in amongst like 78% of personal trainers felt uncomfortable on camera. No. I want you to hear that. 78% of personal trainers felt uncomfortable on camera. 78%. I want to emphasize that stuff. And if I'm walking around or moving, or I'm just letting my voice be, none of that is emphasizing. One of the other big mistakes that people make is, look, if I want to put a pause after something, if I put a pause after something where I'm really softly spoken and now I pause, it doesn't have the same impact as if I make a really clear statement like 78% and let that hang. The pause that follows after that is a more impactful pause than the one that followed after this. You have to earn pauses. On stage, performing with anything, you have to fucking earn a pause, right? Like, and on
Instagram's
camera,
even worse, right? Because the average attention span is like 6 seconds. They'll tune out. Like jump cuts are such an important thing to learn how to do for that exact reason.
Yeah. Silence is not your friend on social media. You can use it, but you best be good in order to get that, because that's just dead space that isn't filling any of my interest in that. Like if you watch drama and look for when is a suspenseful pause present. And it's very rarely, though it does happen, it's very rarely the first opening shot, because there's no context. So unless you give me something that's obviously fuck, like a body,
yes,
right, or something kind of like that, you aren't opening with a big suspenseful no sound, unless there's, you can use it because not many things do it. So under the right conditions, we're almost expecting some noise and sound and this scene setting thing. So if I had dead silence and I was, either panning in or out from, let's say, a woods, so I could start close up on a body, so I can't really tell what it is. And just with no sound, I slowly peel back and you gradually reveal this dead body that's been mangled, or there's some like shit.
Or someone jumps out here. When you were describing that story, I was waiting for someone to jump out.
Yeah, exactly. So you could do that. It's rarely done in the very opening, but you could, right? Or you do the opposite. I start from like a bird's eye view, almost like a hot air balloon kind of up in the thing. And then I slowly zoom in on this, in my head, I've got cornfields and then I've got one ring of trees and I can't quite see what's in the ring of trees. And I slowly keep going through. But God, how long can I keep that going with no noise, with no orchestra doing something to keep me going? Like there's limits. Usually, especially in theater stuff, when I want a suspenseful pause, it has to have come after like I need a moment. I need a big fucking moment to go, oh, shit. Now what? Like you have to earn a pause. And social media, you ain't got time to earn a pause. So for Instagram, basically presume silence is not your fucking friend, right? So when you go through the edit, any gaps in the audience that last more than 0.2 seconds, I cut. So that means zooming in and being like, cut. When I do my first edit, the first thing that I do is I use Final Cut Pro. You can use iMovie or whatever you use, Adobe. Pull up that. I just zoom in a little bit so that I can see the waveform on the audio. And I just cut all the sections where it drops so that I've just got the bits where I'm clearly speaking and saying something. So whenever I'm talking to camera, I just chop those bits out. And that's a quick take. Then I'll watch it. And then there'll usually be, 3 or 4 takes of the same thing, the same point. So camera tips, right? Which one of those do I like the most? That one, sweet. Those 3 others can fuck off. Right, next section.
Do you typically elongate pauses to allow that editing process to be easier? Because I think one of the things that people struggle with when it comes to editing is that the people don't like silence, right? So they'll fill their silences. And even when you try and be silent, you realize I've done it where I've gone, okay, I'm going to stop. And then I go into it too quickly, or I move, or I immediately look. I'm not saying anything, but I look down at my paper. Should you elongate like camera tips, freeze.
Yeah, so I've actually got, I don't think I've put this one out yet. There's a camera tip coming that is just called stare at the lens for longer than you think after you finish speaking. So, and the reason for that is for the edit. That let's say I make my point, and you don't have to do this on every single one. And if you're a very confident speaker, you need to do this less, but it's still an important part, because in the edit, when you're chopping these things together, if you've made a point and then you've sort of drifted into the other one, there's no clear point at which to now snap that cut together. So you get this like half finished point into, and then if you try and cut the into, you get like a little bit in the cut.
I would argue as a confident speaker, it's actually harder rather than easier, because I think a confident speaker will naturally have the confidence to, because they're not nervous. Like I find this, because I can put up a bullet point here and I can just go and I can just run with it and get 70% where I want to be, but it'll be choppy. But if I was nervous, I would stop because I think I'm going to be rubbish.
So I think that I have a tendency towards this as well, which is I have a tendency to say more than I need to. And that I can keep talking and I'll just keep talking. And then I'm like, how did I get over here? Where if that's more of your tendency, then again, with the bullet point, I could do a few different takes of this, but what's the quickest way I could say this? Or what's the like bluntest way? I know I have this tendency to waffle too much. So I'm going to play with being concise and let's see what happens. So I might do a really concise take. And when I hit a pause where it's a finish and there's an impulse within me to give more info, because that usually happens, I'm just not. I'm just going to make that point and go, okay, right, look down at my thing. Okay, what's my next point? And as you've kind of rightly discovered, you know, when you've got your points there, you'll look at them and because in your head, you've gone, okay, I've scribbled down here on my notes as we're speaking, lying to perceived mastery was something I scribbled down when we were talking kind of earlier about a point I wanted to make. Well, if I was making that to the camera, a mistake that I've made many times, and it's not a big one, it's easy to rectify, is you start speaking before you're back at the camera. So you're like, lying to perceive, oh no, wait, hang on, caught myself doing it. Right, stop, look, lying to perceive, right. And just making sure that when I start, I'm being clear with where I'm looking and focusing my attention. One of the biggest mistakes people will make is talking not down the lens. So, you know, if they're filming themselves on their camera, they're looking at their face. Like, no, stop looking at yourself. It's not about what you look like. It's let's look at the person on the opposite side of this. Or let's say I'm doing an exercise library and we're doing like, this is the dumbbell chest press, right? I'm going to deliver that first bit down the lens because I want it to be the other person on the other side knows, oh, it's talking to me there, and this is what this thing is going to be. If I've got another helper over here on a bench ready to go for that thing who's going to demo the movement, I want to be clear that I'm moving between talking to the camera lens and talking to the specific parts of their body that I'm going to point at or that I want attention drawn to. So my gaze and my hands and my body language need to be clear with where I'm directing your attention. And we tend to want that stuff to be really clear. Like if it's sort of a bit limp and soft, it's a bit like, you know, if you're training someone in a session and you're trying to use touch to bring their awareness to a muscle of some kind. I always use the glutes because it's the one that makes me laugh the most when you do it like shit, because it just sounds creepy. But like, look, if I want someone and they struggle to connect and contract their glutes, if I gently touch their arse cheeks, it's weird. I'm being like quite creepy and like I'm just stroking the stranger's ass. Like,
that's the edit. By the way, that's the edit that's going out as the 1 minute tip.
Perfect. Now, first off, you will want to check with your client. I'm going to jab you in the arse. Mind there, right? Like whatever that happens to be ahead of time. And there's a bit of a judgment call whether you're right, you think this is right for the client in front of you anyway. If they're a complete beginner and they're just getting used to stuff, or they're obese or anything kind of like that, they don't need this yet. But if they're really trying to grow their glutes as much as they can, they're pretty well developed, you've got a good rapport with them, and they struggle with this, you know, we think nothing of it if I poke someone in the lat or the bicep or the whatever. Cool, I'm just going to use that same thing. But if I'm going to poke the glutes, I'm going to take 2 fingers, fun times, right? But I want to push right into the belly of the muscle, right? So I'm going to push firmly down on a glute cheek. I'm not going to lightly stroke. It's weirder if I gently place my hand on you with a really light touch. That's creepier. Press, be firm, be clear. It's much more professional. It doesn't seem anywhere near as weird. The same is true when gesticulating on camera. If I want your attention here, I want it here. No voice emphasis, no hand placement. I'm going to look at it there, and then I'm going to come back, right? Be really clear with how you're directing someone's attention with this.
From
all those things.
From someone who's like used hobbies for a few years is doing card magic, and one of the big things they talk about, because a lot of that is presentation. But you talk about the bigger action will disguise the smaller action. So like if I'm doing, I know a magician never way tricks, but if I'm doing a color change where I shake like this, and I'm basically just flipping the card over, people don't notice me blatantly flipping the card over under the bigger action of doing this. And as you said earlier on about being visual, people learn visual first. If you can direct attention and then you can direct volume. There's a great TED talk by a magician who talks about he does magic as his main career, but he goes into businesses and helps leaders with their presentation skills, because that's what he's done with magic. And he had this person that came in and no one bought into him as a manager, and people didn't understand why. And he went on stage and he was like, we're going to do this and this, and we're going to project this. And he goes, and he comes off stage and goes, are you not into your business? Because no, I'm really into it. I'm really into it. He goes, well, why didn't I hear that up there? And it's that volume and that presentation of it. And like going back into the bullet points and the scripts thing, because obviously that's something that's, is tricky for many people. Like, now maybe this is just, you've kind of alluded to it a bit, but maybe this is just like your natural personality shining through. As we can see on this show that's unscripted, you're a funny guy naturally. But I always find that when it comes to scripting, what is your process? Because I often find that if it's too much scripted, it often feels stilted and not natural and not that warmth. But if there isn't, we have that tendency to go off on a tangent like we spoke about before. So where's this balance for you in terms of scripting?
Yeah, well, I think I think you're right in saying it varies person to person. There's no hard and fast rule on some of this stuff. Some people are naturally very gifted at just being able to riff. It's like improv, right? But to be a great improviser as a musician, you tend to first have to be a great musician. So generally speaking, people who are really good at not needing much scribbled down are great on camera already, right? So we can maybe presume that if you're the kind of person who's interested in what we're talking about here, that maybe that doesn't apply to you as much. There'll still be things they can work on, because there's things we can all work on, but we can presume that doesn't apply as much. So then we've got this trade-off of bullet points versus longer form scripting. Now, if you're going to longer form script, and sometimes that's appropriate, like maybe if you've got the intro for your website, you actually want a fully scripted thing, and then you're going to read that from a teleprompter. But then you run into how good are you at reading from a teleprompter?
It's harder than it looks, isn't it? Like, so like, I lose track of like, I'm doing this,
Yeah, exactly. Or you're kind of like, your mouth's getting dry and you're feeling the need to rush on this sentence, and then, oh crap, bugger, right? All that can happen. So, but it makes it nice and clear on, I'm not going to waffle too much. I'm not going to go off on this tangent because I have this script. I think one of the keys and one of the camera tips I've got coming is actually on the importance of writing. And in part, it's really that writing is a form of thinking. And the key is not just in the first the first draft. It's in the redraft, just like it's in the edit, that makes this stuff more interesting. Because once I've written something, let's say I want to make my points, whatever they happen to be. Well, again, I'm going to ask that question. Have I made this sentence interesting? Is it clear? Is it concise? Is it relevant for the audience? Am I repeating myself too frequently? Certain other kind of dynamics, things like how does it run with the other sentences? Now, I certainly have an advantage at that relative to most other trainers because I have a performing background. And so I'm very used to scripts and I read a lot. I like words. And so when I'm reading something, I can get a very good feel for how does that read? Are those sentences that are the same as each other too much get really repetitive and boring because there's a rhythm to what we're saying and another point and then this and then that and then and if we have this continual no difference or no point of difference between sentence length and structure and emphasis, it gets repetitive and boring. And some of that is like feel, and you get better at it over time of going, that's maybe there's a better way of saying this. So actually getting better as a writer, check out a book called On Writing Well. Stephen King has a good book on writing. George Orwell has one on Why I Write. Mark Forsyth has a bunch of, he's just a really lovely writer. The Elements of Eloquence has a crap load of rhetorical tricks and tips for you to try. And I just said tips and tricks you can try, which is alliteration. So there's little things you can steal. He called it the elements of eloquence for a reason.
But that's hard to edit on a video if you were trying that, though, wouldn't it? That's a tongue twister as well as alliteration.
Yeah. So, but there's little bits that, again, they're stylistic choices. And writing and then rewriting allows you to come back and go, okay, does this serve those purposes, those lenses that I'm going to look at for this and look at them through? Is it interesting? Is it relevant? Is it boring? Is it me? Is that a joke I would actually make? Or am I just copying what I heard Paul say because he'd make that kind of joke and I thought he was interesting when he did this? Doesn't mean it applies to you. It needs to be you. And so that all takes time. And so when you're starting out writing those things, and sometimes just writing a thing will give you a way of explaining a point where you're like, oh, that's a good way of explaining it. And then maybe I don't need to read it perfectly. I'm like, okay, what was my point? And I wrote it, so I kind of know where the point is and how it's structured. I'm like, okay, that's roughly it. All right, let's just try a take. I'm not going to read it. I know it's kind of in the back of my head, and I'm just going to try a few times, and I'll fuck it up a few times because I definitely will, right? But I'm like, okay, was that right? And then as you get more confident with this is also why it's useful to have worked in a gym and to have all those stories in your locker, to those analogies that you have that you know you can jump to when you're explaining point A or point B. That was you practicing with people and finding what worked and what didn't. Writing is just practicing. How do I clearly portray this point? How do I convey it? And then did I do it well? And then, okay, now I've written that out and that's all right. Let's try delivering it. And so once I've done a bunch of writing, maybe then I bullet point from the writing and then roll into that thing. Fitness rants, for example, though I haven't done one for a while, tend to live a bit like that. An idea might hit me and I'll be like, okay, that's a good idea. Or an interesting one. And then I'll just start scribbling on notes, just sentences or things that I think might be vaguely interesting or a funny way of saying it. Sometimes that's just bullet pointed. Sometimes it's longer sentences, and I'll just literally read it on my iPad before I do the take. Go, and the longer the sentence, the harder it is to get right, and the more fuck ups I put in it.
That's what I've just done now, by the way. Like I hate typing when I'm on a podcast. I've only done it twice.
No, I do it sometimes.
I did Pat Davidson was when I just something he said was like, whoa, I'm writing this down. But for this, I've come up with 3 ideas for videos just by that exact during that blurb. And it's like, if I come up with that, I'll write it down now. I'll come up with it when I jump off the school.
My notes have way too many things I've forgotten to make that I've just scribbled down.
Me too.
Kind of on there. Notes has a voice taking function. If I'm driving, sometimes I'll open the voice dictation and just speak into notes. The annoying part of that is you have to
swipe.
Oh, really?
On your iPad, you can swipe a quick note, and then I record stuff, and that I lose so much stuff through that.
Yeah, that's it. I'm like, it's like, but you're just chucking these things out and being like, okay, can I make that? Is that going to be an interesting thing to put out there? Then once I've done takes in a fitness rant, I'll also play with just riffing. Like sometimes some of the better stuff isn't shit that I've written down. It's just when you're in the kind of flow and you're practiced and experienced with this, just going, all right, let's just see what works. And a bunch of it doesn't work. And I watch it back and I'm like, that's not funny at all. Or that's unnecessary. And so, okay, right. But again, no one ever has to see those or know those. That's just you trying and being like, did it work? Let's watch it in the edit. Let's not judge it until I get to the edit and chuck that out. And I'll do a bunch of those. And then the final part when you're in the edit is being ruthless. What Stephen King calls killing your babies, right? Like, you'll have put time and effort into these things. And so you care about them and you're like, oh, but I like that. And you're like, yeah, but it's unnecessary. It's waffly. It's not quite, I know you like that sentence, but it's not relevant to the audience. Like they're not going to kill it. Kill your babies. Be ruthless with what actually kind of goes out. So, for me, a fitness rant could be anywhere from 2 minutes to like 5 is the longest ones, but I'll often have 20 minutes of footage. Now, that includes the gaps in between stuff, but I'll still be usually chopping down from like maybe 10 minutes of actual takes to get 2 or 3 minutes of stuff that I'm going to use. In part, again, many of those are multiple takes. Sometimes there's not a huge difference. Sometimes I'm like, there's a judgment call in there. There's bits where you're like, I think that's funny. But when you watch your thing back like multiple times, maybe it stops being funny even to you sometimes. You're like, well, I kind of know where that's coming. So how good am I at appraising things? Again, having a background performing makes you, I think, probably better at that because I've got a much bigger frame of reference for these things of going, that will work, that probably won't, etc. But there's an element of style, of choice, of judgment, of just that being a preference that you have. Just like not all comedy is for everyone. Not all styles of writing are for everyone. You are not going to be for everyone. I am certainly not going to be for everyone. I rub plenty of people up the wrong way because it's a bit flamboyant and unnecessary and over the top. Now, I don't always have to be that way. And I'd like to think that if you met me in person, I know how to modulate what I'm like relative to the situation that we're in. But if I'm taking this on overall and I'm dealing with 50 people in front of me, I'd rather be a bit too performative and a bit too attention grabbing than too dull. And so, but you still accept within there that within those 50 people, is there going to be one or two of them, or maybe more, who think that's unnecessary? You don't need to be this loud. Yeah, of course there is.
I remember you speaking last time about the fitness rants, about how it was like Russell Kane meets Russell Brand was the ethos, which if you look at those people, they're controversial, but they're attention grabbing. You can't not listen to them. And I think that becomes a really important thing. And like, moving on, like, because you've covered so many of my questions just by going off on tangents, which is fantastic. But on that exact point of making things stand out, obviously, you've talked now. We've now got someone who's watched this. They've gone away. They've found their niche. They've got their content idea. They've got their script. They've fucked it up 20 times. They've been ruthless, edited it up. But that's only good as long as somebody gets to your video and watches it. Now, I'm not going to talk into social media marketing. That's too big a topic. But in terms of like, is there anything that you do to get more people watching your content? Like, we talk about like how pretty your thumbnails were off air. We see people promoting their videos. Is that something you do, or would you prefer like quantity and practice is better than being perfect? Like, what's your view in how you put videos out? How do you get more eyes on your videos?
So yeah, I don't do anything after that. I mean, I try and make the thumbnails look nice. So I shout out to Simon Mitchell. I've mentioned him before, but Simon did our templates for our social media stuff. Although he didn't do the templates for my late for camera tips thumbnails, that was more, but that was actually still adapting. Canva's awesome, right? Canva has a crap load of pre-made ones, and you can kind of just scroll through a bunch and be like, yeah, that one's similar. And then I put my own branding and colors and logo and stuff into it and be like, is that about right? So some of that is again, a taste issue. And if you don't have a design-minded mind, then outsource that shit. Like it'll be a one-off thing, but it'll make everything look great. And then that's kind of done. So it's a business expensible expense, right? So I would say one thing I would do for myself if I went back several years is it'd be like, pay more people to do other shit for you, even though you're kind of like, do I have the cash to do that at this point? As a result of good investment of that cash, you will make more cash. Now, it needs to be good investment of it, obviously, but many things, if I think, well, I wasted money on this, that, or the other, I could have invested that in a more sensible way. So if that wasn't something that came to me naturally, I would pay someone to do that. I don't think the thumbnails and things are essential because most views come from when you first put it out there. For me, when I'm thinking fitness rants tend to be well shared amongst my audience. And the reason for that is people already think them and they want their audience to know that this is what they think. I've just managed to put it in a way that's funny or engaging. And so, but they're putting it out because they want their audience to know, yeah, this is bullshit. See, and this is a funny way of taking the piss out of it. So they're sharing it because they think it's funny and it makes a point they think is right. They're not, fitness rants aren't drumming up business directly. They're drumming up attention. Whereas camera tips have a slightly different thing. They don't get shared much, but they get a shitload of saves, right? There's a lot of people going, oh, that's really good. And if I'm selling things, I'm more interested in saves than shares necessarily, right? One of the things that was nice.
What's the metrics you look at to know if a video is performing well? So if someone's not clear on the niche, this is obviously an interesting thing to know, so you do more of the stuff that's important. So when do you look at one thing over another?
If I'm looking at value that I've added to my audience, whether that's mechanics stuff and carousels related to that, or video stuff, either for confidence on camera or again, biomechanics-y things, I look at like to save ratios for the most part. If I'm putting content out that's much more about almost sharing and attention, much more so, which really is fitness rants. They're the main thing that I use that for. I'm more interested in shares. You still like to see the saves and you still like the likes and all that stuff. And there is a ratio between all these things. Nothing gets shared more than it gets liked. I mean, maybe something does, but I've never fucking seen it. But I've had some where, if let's say a post I did a post on using house building as an analogy, difficult thing to say, for hypertrophy. That trainers could use to explain to their clients. Again, I was very clear, my audience are predominantly trainers. And so here's a thing you can use that I've used many times over the years. It's a great way of helping clients understand this process and talking about building muscle in the context of building a house. And we need bricks, which is nutrition delivery. We have to smash down the pre-existing walls because you're not allowed to buy more land because your skeleton is your skeleton. So you can blame your parents. This is the plot you're stuck with, right? So we've got to knock down the kitchen wall. We're going to train. That's going to break things down. Then we need a delivery of bricks and materials. Otherwise, you've just smashed your kitchen wall down and fuck all is going to happen after that. So we need some nutrition getting in. We also, if you want to take the analogy to a geeky place, we're going to need some hormonal stuff going on internally because I actually need someone as a site manager going, that goes over there, that goes over there, that goes over there. Now, we can't directly influence that hormonal milieu unless you want to take some exogenous stuff, but we can have an awareness that it works within the analogy. Fine. So cool. And you roll with it through that. So that for me, I know worked well for my audience because about 450 likes and about 300 and something saves. So that's a strong like to save ratio within that thing for me. Other things I'm like, okay, what does that tell me about my audience? There's a lot of trainers who, and I've done a survey on this. One thing you can do is actually just survey your audience, by the way. You use something like SurveyMonkey. You can do it on Google Docs, but just ask your followers, would you mind filling this in for me? And you're just trying to get some demographic and attentional information from them. So, how old are they? How much do they earn per month? Where do they hang out? What are they interested in? And go, okay, that's my audience. Or now it might not be because it might just be the people who filled it in, which is unrepresentative of the rest of your audience, but it's at least something that you can start playing with and going, well, what we've discovered recently from audience stuff is that most of the people who follow us at the Muscle Mentors have been trainers for like 3 years and under. They earn amazing money.
That'd be longer than 3 years.
Yeah. Here's the most surprising one. One of the most surprising and upsetting one, as far as most of these trainers go. About 50% of our audience who filled this in, which is several hundred people, earn less than 2K a month as coaches.
That's depressing.
Which is depressing, right? I'm like, fuck. Okay. So if we're price pointing things for this, we need to know that in terms of either split payment options or having products that serve an audience where that's a reality for them. But I also go, okay, if I know that and I know that this, to some degree, when you've been doing the job a while, you have a bunch of these analogies you can turn to. And for me, that's a relatively basic one that I've used for years. Well, I stuck that out and that did really, really well. Maybe a bunch of trainers don't know some of this basic shit that I've kind of been putting out and using for those things. So that's a perfectly nice metric for that. So yeah, when it comes, circle back to the initial question, do I do anything to get extra eyeballs on? No, I've not. And one of the reasons I've thought about trying to boost fitness rants and other things in the past, things that do well for attention. Problem is I swear a lot and you can't boost things with swearing in.
Okay.
So that hasn't been an option that I've been able to use for that. I could boost other stuff, but it's kind of been all right at going, when you post something, you can see who shares it. It isn't shown directly in your insights, but for 24 hours after you post something, you can see story reshares. So one of the things I'll try and do, I don't always do this depending on how well something's doing and how busy I am, but I try to go through and just say thanks to everyone who shared.
Yeah, me too.
So I'll click on the thing, go onto that, say thanks, appreciate it, dude, whatever. You're just trying to make sure you don't, you care and you appreciate that someone didn't have to do that, and just cultivating that relationship a little bit of, they'll probably share a bit more in the future. Maybe they'll be willing to buy some other stuff. People like to feel like the other person cares about them a little bit and they're not just a bot somewhere in out there who doesn't give two shits about them. Personal training still is personal, whichever way we do it, whether that's improving on camera, whether that's technical biomechanics stuff, or whether it's coaching, whatever. We want to work with people generally we feel like care about us. Yeah, we want them to help. Like ultimately, did he help me make more money? Did he get me in better shape? Those things we're going to need to have as a given. But once you've got that, Well, I also want to feel like, yeah, Simon likes me. He doesn't think I'm a bell end every time we have a call or this, that, and the other. He's fun to hang out with. Like, he's just a nice kind of dude. Within your coaching stuff, if you don't ask in your applications for clients, like, why are you choosing to work with me? Like, why were you drawn, like that kind of thing? Because that's information that you can start to utilize. Like, the things that come up for me in all my coaching applications are people like my personality. That doesn't mean everyone likes my personality. It means the people who come and work for it. But that means, oh, I'm doing an okay job of getting my personality across. So that when we have these things, it's like, yeah, he knows his stuff. And that always comes in true too as well. Like, super knowledgeable, then great results. And really like how he comes across on the podcast or on his content, right? Like his energy, like his personality, think we could have a laugh, etc. That's useful for me to know. Cool. Dig into that. That might not be true for you, and that people might prefer this other side. He's very good at, cool. Right, let's leverage that. Like, to some degree, whenever you're putting out any bit of content, you're paying attention to it and going, this worked or this didn't work. How do I judge that based on the audience size I have right now and all that kind of stuff? Because people with bigger audiences generally are going to get more likes and shares and saves and all that stuff. So can I compare it to my own stuff so far and things that are relevant to me? And then what do I think that information is telling me? Okay, whenever I put out this type of content, it does really well. What does that tell me about the audience? So when I put out strength training related content and showing clients getting really strong, I get a lot more interaction than I do when I put out psychology related things. Okay, what does that tell me about what my audience are interested in? Probably. And do I have products that serve that? Am I paying attention? And so I think you start kind of doing that stuff a little more, because I can't say I've played too much with other ways of getting eyeballs on stuff other than trying to just make sure what I put out is good and relevant.
It'd be interesting, I think, in regards to like promotion, like, because obviously only part of an audience will see a video when it comes out, right, based off the algorithm. It'd be interesting to know whenever you do a fitness rant again, if you did like a countdown on your stories to a new fitness, because it's been a while. I wonder if there would be more people that would see it because they would tune in, like, especially if you had it as like you're clicking go live at a time, like you would do for a live.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. That's not a bad idea at all. Yeah, you'd have to make sure that it was good. ready for the launch of this mediocre.
Just capitalize on the Tinder swindler, because that's what everyone's doing content on at the moment, right? I saw a great one, by the way.
That's not a bad idea.
I saw a great one, by the way. I have to like Googling on air. But there was this guy. I'm going to give him a shout out on this. If I can find his name, I think it was Mark Grice, who basically just had the picture of him with a Tinder swindler on for anyone who's listening to this only. It's a Tinder swindler in a car with a mobile phone in front, and the message reads, "Babe, I need money quick. I need to transform my body with Mark Grice PT to hide from my enemies. It's the only way." And I'm like, oh, fucking touche. Yeah, I fucking love it. So, like, to tie in, because we've covered a lot here. We've covered a lot about what it is that makes a good video and how to get a good video out there. Now, when I'm like, did you follow Chris Williamson?
No.
Follow the podcast Modern Wisdom. It's one of the best podcasts ever. He was a guy that was, believe it or not, on Love Island, then started a business doing club promotion, and now he's sold his business, and now he runs a very, 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 very good podcast. And he's come up with it's more the modern day philosophy. Imagine a young Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson's on his podcast a lot. And he talks about something called the menopause. So when someone gets 30, they reevaluate their priorities. And this is the reason why every bodybuilder starts doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at 30, right?
It's so true.
It's very, very true, right? And like, I lost my train of thought with that there, but like,
I like that.
Yeah, but I've got like so into his stuff in terms of I really have lost my train of thought. I need to edit this down.
We had menopause and Chris Williamson.
Hold on. When I hear the clap, I know to edit, and then I'll go and edit this for hours of the podcast. Yeah, but like going into the I've really lost my train of thought. Oh yes, got it. Perfect. Right. So when we're looking at the like going into psychology, he talks about psychology of men and women, very different things. Very a lot of like man-centric sort of psychology sort of stuff. And they talk about how women like people generally, and they go in towards those careers. Men like stuff, right? Yep. And I think from me, who's, got microphones and ring lights and funky purple lighting thing that I can change at the click of a button. I'm going to go blue. So, and you've got Meccano and various other bits and bobs here and guitars in the background. So we very much fit this stereotype. So every guy listening to this, which is the majority of my audience, as a more of a guy-focused personal trainer, I'm going to go, what is the tech? What is your advice on video gear?
So I don't use anything particularly fancy. If you want advice on gear, check out Gordon Greenhorn or Greenhorn Creative. He's forever putting out bits and pieces. It was our old videographer at the Muscle Mentors. Now works for a guy
Ali Abdaal.
Yeah.
Wow, too well done. Well done, Gordon.
Yeah, he's doing all right. Yeah, I went down and checked out the offices in London the other week. Cool place. So I use a Sony ZV-1. I used a Sony A6000 for a while. Recently changed that to a really small vlogging camera called a Sony Z1.6. It's like 700 quid or something, I think. I got a whole set. It comes with its mic and bits and pieces for like $1,000. It's not a cheap camera, but it's definitely not an expensive camera. I use for fitness rants or things that I'm just talking straight to camera. I have a ring light. I'll just prop that up. I'll usually film behind me. There is a bookcase, a couple of bass guitars and a guitar on a wall, and a Jack Nicholson One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest poster.
I love that. I noticed that earlier. I love that.
Now, and then some of those things are like, well, they're kind of me, right? Behind me in the bookcase, there's a globe, there's a bunch of books, there's a poster of a pulley system, there's a Newton's cradle, there's history books behind them, there's music, there's performing stuff, right? So it's quite a me thing. And initially, half the reason for putting those guitars on the wall and that poster there was when I was filming, there was just nothing behind me. It was just this white wall. So it was kind of, I needed a bit of just stuff to see in the background. It's not essential, but it does make it a little bit more interesting, just to have some texture in the background. So I'll have my ring light. I'll record over there in front of those kind of bits and pieces for the most part. When I'm recording for other bits and pieces, it'll vary. Like right now, when I record these or podcasts, I use Elgato. There's a webcam, face cam over thing here. I use an Elgato microphone and the bits that come with that, and the Stream Deck. All of this is Elgato. I use a couple of Lume Cube lights that sit behind my desk here that I can do a bunch of different things with and flick and what have you. And then there's a couple of arms where I can attach stuff and film at different angles if I'm rolling through that. Sometimes if I'm using a second camera, I will just use my phone, attach that phone onto this hand where it could shoot something else. And I can flick between different cameras using my lovely little Stream Deck and switch between video sources to make those things kind of play with. I've got an Elgato, just to advertise about Elgato. Check out Elgato. I've got a green screen from them, which is super cool because it's... Sorry, I rolled over the dog there.
Is it okay?
that went poorly. This is this portable green screen that just unfolds and is assemblable in all of about 30 seconds, which is rare for a green screen. Previously, you used to have to like unfurl them and do a bunch of different stuff. I've not actually properly played with that yet, but that's basically all the kit that I use for those things.
What did you start with?
The first things I filmed with, I filmed some just on an iPhone. The Sony A6000 was the first thing I properly started filming things on. Before then, I had a cheap Canon thing, but I forget what it was, that I filmed a few things on, but not a crazy amount. I went on eBay years ago, got like a secondhand Sony A6000. They're normally about $1,000. I think I got it for 400, something kind of like that, with stuff, and then use that for years. I think one of the things whenever I'm doing stuff is it for me doesn't need to be too technical. Like I'm mainly interested in the thing that's on camera being interesting, and then basic editing and bits and pieces to do that. Until you start getting some fancy ass kit and really good at the other stuff and maybe some other people around, I think the most important part is that you're the interest. Right? Otherwise, we're just polishing a turd.
When you say you started off, you did a few bits on your iPhone. Obviously, this is where a lot of people watching this are going to be starting off. And like the videos that I've edited and played around with, they're all on my iPhone. I don't have a camera yet, although I have earmarked your exact recommendation. I found where to buy it for cheap. So, but like, is there any tips you would have for someone filming on their iPhone? Because that is trickier. How do you make an iPhone video look good?
Lighting. So you just need something that actually holds it. So I'd still use a ring light or something like that where my phone can sit in the middle of it, and therefore it's well lit. And then I just hit go. Like honestly, there doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. Like as long as you've got a perfectly fine angle for what you're about to do. If you haven't got a ring light, facing towards natural light is always going to be a good shout. But then you need, again, some kind of stand tripod thing that's going to hold it nice and still that you can talk very clearly to.
I think from my experience of like slowly developing my iPhone camera game, from any tips that from my perspective of lower end filming, is the quality of my videos got better when I stopped filming this way. Now that is trickier because I can't now look at it's harder to look at the lens, and I can't see if I'm in shot. So if you see my last video, I'm slightly off. But what I found is something called Filmic Pro, which you can get a remote on your iPad where you can click record from the iPad. It will start the recording on here, and you can see if you're in frame. But the ring light is the big thing I've learned. Is my ring light is off here because I wear these. It rings here, and that is something that's for anyone that's listening to this only. That's my glasses. I get big ring lights for reflection of my glasses, so I have to be off to the. You'll
see that in the pupils of my eyes when doing that. You can see a ring light in someone's eyes when they're in front of a ring light. If you've got the framing issue, it's effectively you want something that will be called a mark on camera stuff, which you can use literally anything that you just put on the ground wherever you need to stand to be in frame.
That's a good idea.
So you'll set your stuff up. Okay, I'll film this way, and we're not filming with the front cam, we're filming with the back cam. So, okay, let's just do a quick practice take where I look where I think the lens is, and am I in frame? I stop, I keep everything where it is. I go round to my phone, look at it and go, was I in shot there? Yes. Did I look at the right place? Yes. If no, move the mark to where you're in frame. Make sure you know where you're looking. Solve it that way. You only need one run at that to figure out that's where I need to be, that's the distance, that's where I need to look. Sweet, and you're away.
I love that tip. So if we're going for a few closing questions before we close off here, some of these will be more directed to the topic, and some of these will just be a little light-hearted thing. So this can be anything. It doesn't have to be a camera tip thing, but I've started to ask this on the podcast. I used to ask this afterwards in terms of who would you recommend I interview in a later podcast? I've started moving this question on to the end of my podcast. It occasionally gets a few pauses of like, oh, you caught me off guard. But I like it. And I like it because of this, is that every single person that is successful in anything, whatever you consider successful, got there with the help of others. And I want to recognize that for people who may be intimidated by some of the people that come on, they're just like you. So if you had a recommendation for me of who could I drop a message to on a DM with tomorrow, who can I slide into their DMs do you think would give value to my audience?
That'd be easy in that case. Based on what we talk about today, I've mentioned him already. Simon, check out Simon Mitchell.
Okay, cool.
Simon will come on. He's a good speaker. He's actually good in front of camera as well, and will provide a lot of value related to crap we've covered today.
Fantastic. I love that. Cool. So another thing, this is, I can't take credit for this one. This is from a diary of a CEO. It's one of his last questions that he asks. I'm going to ask you if you have a question for my next guest. Now, you probably won't know my next guest, but I'm going to give you the topic, and you can ask anything you like, and I'll ask this at the end of the show. So I've got a guy called Jeff So on tomorrow, and he's more coming out of a hole in depression and working on psychology and leadership. Is there any question you want to know for that kind of topic?
Welcome to insert pause and thinking time now.
I'll fill it or edit it.
Ask for someone who is coming out of depression.
Yeah, that was his story. And now he's like a psychology, mindset, leadership sort of coach. Do you want to give me my other question and come back to it?
No, we can roll with it. I'm trying to think of what you might cover already in there, and therefore what might be a more interesting / controversial take to ask someone. How would you go about defining the limits of mindset work for someone in depression? How do we start to understand when they need to do the work of whatever that happens to be versus when they'll need professional help with that?
Okay.
How do we differentiate?
Okay, cool. I like that. Okay, I'm going to have that written down in here. Awesome. And The last question I'm going to ask you before for where to find you and everything like this, and the usual podcast ending, is something I've never ever done before on any show. But I think this is a relevant topic because I do think there's a relevant parallel here. We mentioned that video, being confident on camera, and people's style are very different for every single person. And we mentioned that you do need a blunt friend.
Yep.
Now, whether it's stories or whether I don't know if you've ever watched any of my videos, if you had a piece of advice for me, can be as blunt or as friendly as you like. I don't take things too personally. What would it be? How could I upgrade my camera and video skills in my next video?
Interesting. So then, when we see Simon, we see a warm, friendly. Would I say warm as much? A friendly. There's an element to you that possibly it's not warm, but I wouldn't say it's the warmest either. So there's an element of authority figure here that cares, but it cares from a slight distance relative to how some people would come across doing a similar thing.
What makes you say that, out of interest?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's that. Like if we were to think of the warmest, cuddliest, teddy beariest human we could think of, where that person, you just want to give them a hug the whole time. Like there's, and some of this will just be related to, the jokes we make and how we come across to people. And I think whenever we're wanting to discuss things intellectually, not always, but often puts a step between just an immediate emotional kind of thing, which is no bad thing because it positions us a bit more authoritatively than if we're super emotional kind of all the time. I think generally more guys come across like this than the others. I think whenever I've seen some of the camera stuff, I think the position you're in now, where we're closer to the camera, is likely to be more usable. I think some of the ones I've seen were a bit further away, and whenever we're sort of further away and we're working like half body shot, we lose an element of speaking closely to a friend. Like, so if I want to share stuff where I'm letting you in on a tip, or I want you to like me, or I want to feel kind of close to the person that I'm talking to, I might get just a bit closer to camera while I'm making those points. If I'm a bit further away, it just adds a distance. It's almost like less talking to a friend when I'm just a bit further away. So depending on what we're delivering and how we're doing it, I might just play with being a little bit closer as I talk to that, fill more of the screen, more of the space. So when that person scrolls on their phone, I'm here, hey, right? And playing with that thing. I think we're trying to find for you, and what I've seen so far, the fun and the thing where we get some of Simon's personality, but I don't know that we've quite got it to the point just yet where it's relaxed and you still. There's an element in it which I think still feels a tiny bit performative. Doesn't feel completely you yet.
Yeah.
It's on the right path, and I think that's just a case of time and practice. And probably playing with some of the things you'll have heard me do, like do a bunch of takes, go a bit too far, and then bring it back, and then I did this really flamboyant one, and now I'm just going to talk a bit more normally, having done that one, but making the same points, and just see how does that sit after that thing. I think we're still absolutely likable. You've got a really nice combination of likable and clear and knowledgeable. So that's all gravy. We could play with the warmth thing if we wanted to play with that. And I think actually part of that is just being a bit closer in and actually playing with the physical space of a friend, which is here. So that I
think the last video I did help with that. That's playing around with your editing stuff. That I'm not rigid, like, okay, I'm in shot here. And I'm not editing it much, so I can't. Whereas now I can go, okay, stop, make sure I'm in. Okay, good to go. So that's okay. That's good advice. It's something really I can sort of play around with. And I'm glad you went down what my personality is on camera, because that's really interesting to know.
Yeah, I think you could also probably play in that case with just the idea of all the time that I'm talking here, I want you to like me. Right? So what does that mean if I'm talking to an old friend down that thing? And I'm just going to keep in mind, am I coming across as likable? Does this person like me? am I like, because I think that would suit you quite well. We're not talking about, you know, a JP. It's like, I want that warmth of you, and and then we can add the silliness in and all the other kind of bits and pieces that are you too. But I think we could add that in to begin with, and just go, when you play with warmth in a take and likability, okay, I'm going to make this point, whatever this point fucking happens to be, make sure I'm likable while I say it. And that can be as simple as I say this, I want to reassure you. Like, whatever that happens to be, can I play with something like that? So maybe try that and see how that goes.
That's awesome advice. And I'll get to work on that, and I'll definitely tag you in any attempt that I make, and let me know how.
Like, he comes across horribly, I take it back immediately.
Yeah. I'm just going to reshare my story now. You're going to reshare it and just put dick or terrible. Yeah, exactly. So, just colder across the screen, you know. Like, so this has been awesome. I think we've you know, anyone watching this has got like literally a how-to guide from start to finish of how to create their content. So for people who want to know more about you, and obviously you've got your camera tips seminar coming up. I haven't missed a boat on this, right? Soon. Tell us a bit about that, and tell us a bit about where people can find you.
So you can find me at Paul at the Muscle Mentors, Paul _ the Muscle Mentors on Instagram is the easiest place to find me. I have a new ebook coming up, actually, which is going to be a free ebook on this, camera tips for personal trainers who want to improve their confidence and competency on camera. They're the kind of main bits. There is a workshop coming on the 5th of March, but that, if you're in Hong Kong, will be difficult to get to, as it's in person in London.
Yes.
But if you are anywhere in
the UK,
yeah. What I'm probably going to be putting together as well, though, is some kind of online course thing for this in the somewhat near future as well, because that was one of the things that came up is, I can't get there. And
I'm not against traveling. I physically can't get there for
exactly,
for reasons, because I love this country. Sorry, not getting arrested.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, that's
awesome. Well, thank you very much, man. This is great. It's great to have round 2. Your episode was mega popular the first time. But as we've had some big dogs come in, we need to get you right back up there in the top 5. And I do think the content here is good enough to do that. So thank you very, very much. And obviously drop me a link when your ebook comes live and things like that. And I'll put it in, you know, I'll put it in the show notes, even if it's after it comes out. But thank you very much, man. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me on, dude.